ACT team has been assigned a new staff assistant or staff support personnel. Her name is Rachel Nelson, and she is on the call with us. And Rachel is going to take over doing the roll call attendance and voting today. So Rachel, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and go through that quorum list, that would be great.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So the first person is QB Anthony. Luz Martinez. Roseanne Ibarra.
Present.
Lisa Judd.
Yes.
Jacqueline Williams.
Here.
Susan Wind Novotny.
Yep.
Grace Peeler I'm sorry if I say it wrong, Stankiewicz.
Lindsay Guthrie and Keith Driver in for Grace.
So Libby, who will we be calling on to do the roll call voting? You or Keith?
Call on me, and then Grace should be on here by 2:30. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, Paul Davis.
Here.
Okay. Zinnia Leva Chow. Sorry if I say your name wrong.
Here.
Thank you. Karen Lovato.
I'm here.
Blythe Post or Brady Nord.
Life Post is here.
Thank you. Amanda Archer or Joanna Olson. Okay. Judy Albert.
Here.
Thank you. Camille Schrader or Sage Wolf. Dan McIntyre.
Here.
Noble Wadelick.
He's here, but we can't hear him.
Okay. I was thinking that. Rachel McDavid. Okay. Sandra Stolfi.
Yes, hi.
Okay. And we have 11 present, 7 absent.
All right, we have a quorum.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, just as a side note, since Rachel is new and probably in best practice for us moving forward, if we are, if somebody's got input on topics, just say what your name is before you start talking on the topic. Just because necessarily the YouTube video doesn't always match the broadcasting screen. So sometimes it's hard to tell who's actually talking. So just as a side note, I'll try to introduce, if it's an actual specific topic, I'll introduce you before you take on the topic. But if you have comments or questions inside the presentation, then just introduce yourself quickly so we know who's on the video. Was there any public comment, Rachel or Veronica?
We received no advance requests for public comment. Nobody requested to be on the call or to provide any. And I am admitting Camille right now.
Okay. So we're going to go on to the next approval of the minutes from October 19th of 2020.
I didn't get them completed. My apologies. It's been a long few weeks. I got the ESG application done and that took precedence. So sorry, guys.
Hey, Camille, we'll just table it until next meeting.
Thank you.
We're going to go to reports and presentations. And since Megan bowed out of this, Darcy can hand it back over to Megan if Darcy likes to. But Darcy, do you have an update from the county?
Thank you. Yeah, Darcy Antle, Deputy CEO. As you know, we've been working hard to purchase the Best Western, and that's due to some of the great work that Megan's been doing, and we're really excited about moving that forward. And I think, Megan, you're going to have an update about that at some point. Brief?
Yeah, I can. I'll do a brief update.
Okay. And we do have a board meeting tomorrow. We'll be going in with first quarter budget and of course, COVID update. And of course, my work is pretty full right now between the COVID and disaster recovery with the 2 fires, the Oak and August. Both those fires received a federal declaration, so we're happy about that. Not that the fires occurred, but that we will be getting federal assistance to those folks for both those fires. I think that's brief, and I will defer to Megan.
Thank you,
Unless
Darcy.
you have questions.
Is there any questions for Darcy? Megan, you want to add on?
Sure. I mean, the kind of hottest topic right now is the Project Home Key purchase at Best Western. There is a town hall meeting with Senator McGuire tonight at 6:30. So we're expecting some community members to express concern about the project at that meeting, but maybe others will not be expressing concern. Not totally sure how it's going to go yet. And we're, I think this group knows, because I can't remember the timing of it, but escrow has closed on the building. The county does own the building now, and are working with the architects to develop some of the design modifications that need to happen before the building opens, still with a target date of mid-February. So I did have a workshop with, probably most of you were invited, if not all, last week, I think, to kind of gather your input and ideas about the project, which was super helpful, and I appreciate that. And there will be additional opportunities for feedback and ideas, and incorporate what you all know to be useful in this kind of project into the project design. And I did want to say one thing to this group, because I know you all well, and you know me. I've been a little bit uncomfortable with how this project seems like county, and I usually rely on all my community partners to be a big part of the project. I know you're going to be a big part of the project, but quite honestly, there's so much community pressure on this project right now that I almost want to shield you from being part of the project until some of that has died down. So I do want to say that I am imagining that almost all of you will be very integral into being part of the collaborative process to get this building filled and functional. But right now, I know the focus is on the county, and let's let Darcy and Carmel take all the heat for it until it dies down a little bit. So I just wanted to be clear about that and intentional. So.
Megan also had a meeting last week with some of the city representatives. I know Shannon, I thought I saw Shannon on here, but Shannon, oh, there she is. Shannon was on the call, and I think Noble was on the call as well. And they really appreciated the feedback and the information that Megan shared, because again, the information that's out in the public isn't really the vision that we're focusing on. And I think some of you, and Jackie knows that, and whatnot, but I think it builds some goodwill. I don't know, Shannon, if you want to report. I thought Sage was really engaged and asked some good questions, along with, I think it's Chris, your other person.
Yeah, we really appreciate Megan's work on this project and the involvement. For those of you who aren't aware, typically a project like this would go through what's called a use permit process. It involves notifying the neighbors. It involves circulating information about the project to all of our various departments who comment on it. And we're looking for things to help mitigate impacts in the neighborhood and things like that. And that's the kind of feedback that we usually include in a use permit. County projects like this are exempt from the city entitlement process, including the use permit process. And so in the absence of that, we're very appreciative of the county's willingness to involve us in the process and their receptiveness to input regarding its integration into the community. So yeah, it was a really good meeting, and we look forward to working with the county on it.
Thank you, Shannon, for the update. Veronica, I know you had your hand up. You got a question? You're muted.
I have an update that's not regarding Project Room Key, just an agenda item on the Board of Supervisors. I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention, but I don't know if you want to
No, go ahead.
continue your room.
You can do that now.
I just wanted to let everybody know that on tomorrow's Board of Supervisors agenda, agenda item 5E is discussion and possible adoption of an urgency ordinance for temporary group care facilities for the purpose of allowing for winter homeless shelters during the COVID-19 pandemic and 2020-2021 winter. It's sponsored by Planning and Building Services, and it came from out of a need for to allow Mendocino Coast Hospitality Center to find or operate a emergency temporary coastal winter shelter so that they could possibly be issued a use permit outside of their normal areas. I don't know if Paul or anybody else wants to speak to that, but I just wanted you guys to know it's on the agenda for tomorrow.
Thank you, Veronica. Paul?
It's about the size of it, yeah. We're having a difficult time finding locations this year. A lot of places don't want to do it. And we have some prospects outside of Fort Bragg city limits. But they're in the coastal zone, and I was told that use permits would take 4 to 6 months. So this is a possible workaround for that, so that we can pull the program off. Yep.
Thanks for the update, Paul. Megan, is there anything else from, okay. I just want to let you know that I know Jackie and I have both been fielding calls about the Home Key project and other issues of homelessness in the Ukiah Valley for the last month and a half. So even though the county's taken the heat, we're trying to do our best to support county staff and the mission behind the Home Key and correct the issues behind the information that's just thrown out there. Information and facts may be relative in some parts of this country, but unfortunately here we have to focus on what the reality is. And the reality is that this is only a drop in the bucket of fixing the housing issue we have in the county. And it's just the start. And I think that after sitting in the HAT meeting last week with Supervisor Jurdy and Senator McGuire, that there's some other creative solutions to try to help the housing situation, all the way from those that are unhoused to those that are working level that need housing coming out from the state. So I'll be on the meeting tonight, representing the COC or as part of the COC, just listening to some of the concerns, because it revolves around some of the properties we operate in the county too, as our CHDC. But it's an issue that we have to address holistically, not just from the perspective of limited views. I'll leave it at that. Shannon, do you have an update from the city?
No, I'll just add that the city is also fielding lots of calls from the community, calls, emails from the community regarding homeless activity, primarily around the homeless facility. So, we're dealing with that in our way, and again, working to support the Project Home Key. I know Noble's on the call, but he wasn't able to check in earlier. Noble, is there anything else you want to add from police department?
No, I think I got my microphone working too. So
Good.
No, it was nice to be part of that conversation. That was last Thursday, and kind of be able to give some input.
Thanks, Noble.
Thank you.
Any questions for Shannon? Jackie?
This is Jackie Williams with the question. So I keep trying to stop this stuff. So you guys have to lop me up the side of the head if this makes no sense. But, Dan and I are defining things over and over for folks, or trying to help them better understand that they've mixed. They have multiple concerns, and they kind of bash them together. And then as they write their letters to the editor, express their concerns, it gets mixed up or creates, really inaccurate perceptions. Several years ago, I remember the COC kind of wrote a position. We kept, it was the same kind of thing, but much less friction in the community. And we finally kind of sent out and put on the website, kind of like, here's what's happening and why. And I keep thinking that we may be in that situation again. Maybe after Mike's meeting, we might want to draft, just for the folks that didn't get to attend, what got clarified. But Dean and I are hesitant to do that without asking, a bunch of the rest of you to help us review it to make sure that we're portraying what we believe is accurate and trying to clean up the confusion. There are still people that believe that if it's continuum of care funding, it's just for shelters. I mean, there's people that are way behind in their understanding. And I don't know how we, pull ourselves forward until we kind of rebuild that knowledge base. And so as we go through the meeting tonight, look for things that you believe we may want to take a position as the COC, or just confirm or summarize or whatever, just whatever we could do to help move the community forward. And, as Dan said, there's some strong opinions that are built on inaccurate information. And so there's some people who are never going to change their opinion, but I would like to counterbalance the inaccurate information if we can.
So, Jackie, this is Camille. Thank you for that. I absolutely agree that the COC has a very significant role in community education, understanding, because we're all in this together and all the stakeholders are pretty dedicated to this group. I did see a couple of the letters. I know that the planning is working on the extension of the physical site on building bridges, which has created quite a bit of letters that are both not RCS's, like the project of building bridges was supposed to be a community project with multiple providers and multiple partners. And so I'm hoping we're going to revisit some of the lessons learned in our first year with building bridges, and maybe this is a venue to be able to do some of that. It's real clear that there's a lot, all homelessness cannot be addressed through shelter, transitional housing. It's going to take everything, and including the Best Western Project, which is going to be a wonderful addition. So I really appreciate you being willing to sort of consider how do we move forward in a way that clarifies, educates, and then speaks to, how can we do better? So I'm hoping that this group will be available, and I'm concerned. I'm very concerned, actually. But it feels good that we all have this group is as strong as it is moving forward. So I will also be there tonight, Megan. Politely, encouragingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. If there's no other questions for Shannon, we'll move on to the city of Fort Bragg. I don't know if I saw Tabitha or Sarah here. Did you see him, Veronica?
I have not. No, and I didn't hear from them either.
Okay, we'll wrap back around to them if they show up at a later date. Is there any other reports or presentations right now, Veronica?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to standing committee reports. I'll start with the strategic planning, and then I'll hand it off to Megan. We met an additional time between here and the last meeting, and we spoke about the HEAP funds and finalized the budgets for the second round of the ESG grant money. That was a very productive conversation, and I believe we're going to have another meeting sometime in December, if I'm correct. We have given some indication on how to allocate the HEAP funds, the HEAP interest. I know that both projects that are the large outstanding balances for HEAP are moving forward in a timely fashion, which is good to see those expenditures done. And I know that Megan had got some direction from the strategic planning committee, which I'll let her update everybody on how we can use that interest funds in the most effective manner possible. since it's the most time constrained funding. So go ahead, Megan.
So I'm trying to think back a little bit and make this more succinct. So of the unallocated HEAP funds include both the interest on the HEAP allocation, which was at least $70,000. And then we know that at least one of our projects is not going to be able to spend about $50,000. So I think we're at roughly $120,000 in HEAP funds that would need to be spent, not just encumbered or allocated, but actually spent by June 30th, 2021. So the direction from Strategic Planning Committee was to use a portion of those funds for the unmet administration costs. I'm not sure if all of you remember, but for whatever reason, when the COC received this $4.9 million allocation, we only allocated $12,000 for administrative overhead. I think it's because we really wanted to put as much money possible to the projects themselves, but it was really underfunded on the administrative level. So we're going to be able to use some of these unmet funds to backfill that need. And then some of that administrative costs are obviously staff time, fiscal time, a lot of just, you know, the work of running these contracts and getting these projects going. But we also are hoping to use some of those funds for consultant costs for program review that we're going to talk about a little bit later. So that will be another opportunity to use those funds. And I have to be honest, we designated a portion of these funds for homeless prevention activities, primarily because those activities were strongly de-emphasized in the ESG allocation that's coming up. But I don't think we actually had a clear vision on how we were going to do that yet. It was, and I think Veronica and I were supposed to think about it, and we probably haven't yet. So what that homeless prevention part will look like, I don't have a lot of detail on, unless somebody can enlighten me or remind me.
I'll kind of jump in on the homeless prevention. This Dan again is originally, if everybody recalls, we had allocated some funding for I'll say a slush fund for doing housing needs, whether it be bus tickets out of town, temporary rental assistance, whatever that case may be. The thought was to extend that process. We can put some of the HEAP funds into that same slush fund and expend those funds prior to expending the other money we'd already allocated to that
perfect.
fund.
I couldn't exactly, thank you, Dan, for reminding me that. I thought that was the case, but I wasn't totally sure. So I appreciate you telling me that. So that would be awesome. We do have this, what we're calling an immediate housing needs fund, kind of a barrier busting fund. And it has been really useful in resolving kind of immediate needs of people who have small, quick barriers for housing. So that will be great to be able to use those funds for that.
And another thing on that is when it comes around, because the eviction moratorium, I believe, is going to be coming up in January. I know there's a ton of money that NCO has right now that has, expenditure deadline of December 31st. And a lot of the stuff has these really hard, strict deadlines. However, come January 31st, rolling into February, depending on what the governor does with the executive action, there could be a wave of evictions where people might need some cash assistance to stay in housing, even if it is only their 30% of income. Because I don't think a lot of people are really clear on the restrictions and their ability to have to demonstrate they have a COVID related burden, as well as pay 25% of their rent in this time frame. So, some of those funds may be able to help with that, and or relocation of, people to the Home Key project or other barriers that need to be burnt down that for whatever reason got left out of the ESG funding, which is, eviction prevention and homelessness prevention seems just as important as emergency shelters to me. But Veronica?
The committee had also talked about increasing the budgets for current homeless prevention projects that are being offered by COC providers. So we have, I believe that both RCS and Hospitality Center operate a homeless prevention project. And so there was discussion about possibly like a $50,000 or less contract with them to beef up their projects if we couldn't use all of the funds in the immediate housing funds.
That's correct.
So Veronica and I have some work to do there. We really need to get that going. If we are going to do contracts, we're going to need to do them almost immediately in order to both finish the contracts and have those funds spent. I do want to piggyback a little bit on what Dan said. I think for all of us on this call, it is I really want to encourage you to, if you have clients that have any housing related need that is somehow impacted by COVID, they really should reach out to MCO and use that application process, because they do have funding there and case managers there, and that's what it's for. So when we have an immediate housing needs request, we may immediately fulfill that one, but also encourage people to reach out to that funding source as well. I want to really make sure these funds are getting to the people they're intended to serve. So.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions on the strategic plan, or Shannon, did you have anything else that I know you were at the last meeting that we missed on in that conversation?
No, I think you covered it well, Dan. Thank you.
Okay. I think there's as we try to transition through this process and give information out to people about the housing needs, about the meals program Shannon and I have talked about for the seniors in town, right? There's this disparity of thought process that a lot of people that have housing needs have access to, social media or a lot of this information. And what I'm finding, even with our residents, we have over 1,200 residents that we serve and across the counties, is we have to give this information to people because they're more concerned about, hey, how am I going to go buy food tomorrow? Or how am I going to pay this bill than, looking on the internet, trying to find out what programs are there, because a lot of people have a tendency just to panic instead of try to find the resources, or they go and result back into an addiction habit that just perpetuates on top of the problem they already have. So,
yeah. Dan, I'm glad you brought that up. Do you mind if I say something about that program real quick?
No, please do, because it's a program that's really good. And I think that the more information we get out there, the more likelihood we'll have a program like that in the future.
Yeah, so this is the Great Plates Delivered program, and many of you probably heard about it. There was an initial push when the program first came out, and then we haven't heard a lot about it. Well, we were recently informed by the county that, not only can new clients continue to sign up for this program, but new restaurants can as well too. So basically, clients can sign up for meals to be delivered to their house 7 days a week. You can choose how many meals you want. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner are options. You can have 1 meal a day. You can have 3 meals a day. Inland, it's the Ukiah Brewing Company is providing all the meals. They're doing a fantastic job. There are 4 other restaurants on the coast participating. Basically, it's a super simple online form. It's just on the county's website. I think it's mendocinocounty.org/Great Plates. And you can't be receiving any other food subsidies. So you can't be getting food stamps, but you can have a housing subsidy or other types of subsidies. You just can't have food subsidies. So I'm not sure how many of your clients that fits with, but it's a fantastic program. It helps the restaurants stay in business. It's not, abusing the system in any way. It's a super simple form to fill out. Literally takes about 2 minutes. So if that works for any of your clients, if they need meals delivered, one of the questions, for example, is, can you prepare meals for yourself? And a lot of people are kind of proud and they'll say, well, technically I could prepare a meal for myself, but if preparing meals for yourself means putting yourself in uncomfortable situations or going to the grocery store when you should stay sheltered at home, don't let people be afraid of that question. The answer is no, I cannot prepare meals for myself. And again, as long as they're not receiving food subsidies, they should be taking advantage of this program. FEMA is paying for it primarily. The county is paying a portion of it. It's extended in 30-day increments, but the county says that they believe it will be continued for quite some time in the future.
Thank you, Shannon.
So Shannon, I didn't hear what the eligibility. It's just anybody who's sheltering at home?
Seniors.
So,
Yeah. I need to be a senior, and you need to self-certify as low income. You can't be receiving any food subsidy.
Okay.
And other than that, it's pretty wide open.
So it's going to be
senior is 65 and up?
Yes.
Right.
And it's
so
gonna be,
actually there's more than that. So on the Adult and Aging Services website, there's eligibility criteria. It's age 65 and over, or age 60 to 62 at high risk for COVID-19. They have to be unable to prepare meals at home, live alone or with one other eligible adult, don't have a current support system, and do not currently receive meals from another federal program. Persons can apply at mendocinocounty.org/Great Plates, or they can call 463-7900 or 1-877-327-1799.
Thank you, Veronica. Darcy, did you have something?
No, thank you. Veronica got most of it. If the program, we assume the program is going to last at this point, through the holidays for sure. At that point, it will be over $5 million out to these restaurants to do this work. And it is FEMA sponsored. It is California state sponsored. So the county's portion is 7%, 6.83% of that. So it's a really good program for your clients to tap into. And Shannon did a good job explaining it. So yes.
Thank you, Darcy.
So is this just within the city limits, or how far does it extend, Shannon?
It's the whole county.
It's county-wide. So there's 5 restaurants right now. As Shannon mentioned, Wild Fish is involved, Cucina Verona, Mendocino Cafe. There's another one on the coast that I can't think of right now, and Ukiah Brewing Inland.
Okay.
And they transport the meals. They take the meals out, and they're nutritious. They have to be meet some nutritious level. About sodium and sugar and those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to Shelters and Solutions. I don't know if Angelica's here, if there's an update.
Angelica is not present, and they did not have a September meeting. It occurred on the same day and time as the Strategic Planning Committee, so they decided to cancel. Their next meeting is scheduled for next Monday, November 23rd at 10 a.m. Anyone who wants to attend can contact me or Angelica to get a link to it. We'll also be posting the link to the Hand Up Not Handout mendo.com website.
Okay. We'll go to coordinate entry discharge, Sage or Camille. Or Veronica?
Hi, I'm sorry, Dan.
We're just doing the coordinated entry discharge planning. I didn't know if you had anything on the training that's coming up this Thursday.
I don't specifically know. I know Sage is trying to get some information to Megan before tonight's meeting, so that's probably why she's not here. Veronica, do you know?
I do. So the annual coordinated entry training is this week, November 19th, Thursday. If anyone wants to attend, they should send an email to Sage at Wolf, WOLFS, so Wolf S at redwoodcommunityservices.org. This is a training for people who are actually sitting down with persons experiencing homelessness and conducting these coordinated entry assessments. So it's not really a general informational kind of meeting. It's really to teach you how to fill out the form and how to interact with the client. In addition to the upcoming training, at the last meeting, the committee, the Vice Chair or Co-Chair, Danielle Davis from Community Development Commission, had to step down. And so at this point, we only have a chair in Sage and a recorder in me. But that vice or co-chair position is vacant. The committee explored the ramifications of not having enough time and staff resources to dedicate to being the coordinated entry lead entity. And so the committee is exploring, is going to be putting together a presentation for this board at the next meeting. about a potential, recommendations for going forward, how to address it, things like that. I can answer any questions about it right now, but I think that's pretty much a good update.
Thank you. Any questions for Veronica? More to come. Membership committee, Veronica?
I don't have an update.
Okay. Gary, do you have an HIMS performance measures update? Where's Gary here? I don't see Gary.
I don't see Gary or Brian either. I'm pretty sure I set the agenda, but that's okay. The committee hasn't met since the last report out, but Brian has returned to the home team from being temporarily reassigned to the Disaster Operations Center. So he's back full-time working for us, and we'll be picking that back up because he's the chair of that committee. And so we'll have a better updates moving forward. I can share that regular monthly data quality reports are being sent out to all agencies, and that we're kind of struggling with who to send those data quality issues regarding the coordinated entry enrollments. And so that's kind of what spurred the conversation about needing more staff for the CES lead. And that our system is up and running. It's going pretty good. We're learning about the new ways to create the new ESG programs. HUD has new guidance out for that, so we've been reviewing those. And that's all I have off the top of my head for right now.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. Is there any questions on the HMIS? I'm alphabetically challenged today. Okay, now we're going to move on to ad hoc committee reports. Point in time, Veronica, I know that your executive summary is still in progress, as we spoke last week, but if you want to kind of give an update on the action item we have to take on for the 2021 pit count, and the reasons behind the recommendation for not doing a unsheltered count in January, if it's not obvious. Yes.
So today, this morning at 10:45, I received an email from HUD. It's a mass email that they send to all COC providers, I think, about the 2021 HIC and PIT count updates. There are no changes or waivers available for the housing inventory count or the HIC. That's all pretty much done electronically over the phone, things like that. So I'm not concerned. There's no person-to-person interaction there, so we can do that. We are still to conduct a sheltered point-in-time count as normal. HUD has updated their infectious disease outbreak guidance document to include how to count people in motels and emergency shelters. So because this year's a little different, they've given us some more guidance. But I'm just going to read it. Conduct the unsheltered count based on the allowances outlined in this resource they've created. And so in discussing this with our HUD TA provider, Chris Pitcher from ICF, there's at the top of the second page of your agenda, there's I just included what he sent to me, in that we can do the unsheltered count if we want to, and HUD's given us guidance on how to do it safely. But we're going to have to, if we choose to do it, we're going to need to convey, what we're going to, anything that we're going to do to make it safer and things like that. I am of the opinion, as is the other members of the home team and our HUD TA provider, we really don't feel like we can pull off a safe count this year. It's mid-November already. Usually we would be 6 weeks into planning it already. Most of our volunteers that we get are retired, often over the age of 65. So our volunteer pool is going to be very, very reduced. I think that because we have more non-congregate shelter this year than we ever have in the past, that we're going to have a much larger shelter count and have a really good view of our insight into our homeless population through that. So I'm not too concerned about not having the data to be able to compare. In this HUD, this email from HUD, they say that they understand this year isn't going to be very different, and they're not even planning on comparing this year's unsheltered count to past ones. And so I'm really, really not concerned at all if we do not do a count. If we do an unsheltered count, it would be very concerning for me. We would need to have a lot of support from the COC board in order to make that happen. So what is before the board today is, should we plan or should we not plan to do a 2021 unsheltered point in time count?
Thank you, Veronica. Is there any questions for Veronica on this?
So the point in time is like, could be like every 2 years, yes?
So the unsheltered count is supposed to be every odd year, so every 2 years. So it would normally be required this year. Mendocino County, since I think around 2011, started doing counts annually, unsheltered counts annually, even though it wasn't required by HUD. So normally HUD would be, everybody has to do it because it's an odd year, but because of the pandemic, they're making these exceptions.
Any other questions?
Veronica, I just want to support the decision if it is to not make the count and just to go with, the congregate shelters that we have. The count is always somewhat questionable in my mind anyway, in terms of its real value. And to try to pull it off in the midst of what's going on right now just seems foolish.
This is Sonia, and I agree with Judy.
Thank you, Zinnia and Judy. Any other questions?
Roseanne, because I'm new and haven't gone through this process before, would someone be able to give just a really brief overview of what's involved and then what the implications would be of not doing a count?
Sure. So normally to conduct an unsheltered point in time count, we split the county into 3 regions, inland, south, inland north, and then coastal. We have 3 team captains who organize volunteers who are unpaid to learn how to go out on the streets at like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning on a day in the last 10 days of January. These persons would go out and survey outside areas of the county. We have maps and stuff that are set up to direct where people should go, so we don't have, duplication of counting spaces, and so we make sure we have coverage. So all of that's organized. We have teams of 3. Nobody is ever allowed to go alone because of safety reasons. So we always have a driver, a surveyor, and then a scout. The scout is a person who is or has recently experienced homelessness and can kind of guide that team on the best places to look. We know to look under overpasses, but where exactly in that overpass should we look? Like, we need that kind of expertise. So we have teams of 3 that go out. I would not allow anyone over the age of 65 to participate because they're at high risk of COVID-19. I also would not feel comfortable having anyone that has any of those kind of medical issues. And that would actually prevent a very, very key person to this process that would not be able to be participating in it. And I really don't think that my team could pull it off without that person for their confidentiality and medical stuff. I'm going to leave them confidential. But I could see our people on the streets, are folks who are actually experiencing homelessness being very nervous about people coming up, are you from public health? Are you here? Like they're already panicked. I really am nervous about sending people out in the community with clipboards and badges, during this time of year right now. There's lots of other reasons, but it's mostly because we'll have very few volunteer pool will be very small. I don't think we'll have the staff support without the additional staff that wouldn't be able to participate because of the restrictions. And I think that putting teams of 3 together in a car, even with wearing masks, is a risk that we shouldn't take if we don't have to. There's lots more reasons too. Does that help answer your question, Roseanne?
Thank you, Veronica. Yes.
You're welcome.
Jackie?
Roseanne, this is Jackie. In the past, we were always, if we didn't do it and didn't do it well or didn't do it effectively, we could lose. So the ability to do it and do it well enabled funding and participation. So that's why there's such a process focus. But I think, as you've heard from the other folks who've participated, that we're at risk now. And so as long as it doesn't jeopardize funding or other things we rely on, it's probably one of those things we can let go this year.
Okay, if there's no other questions, or if anybody doesn't have any other comments on this, we'll just need if the consensus of the board is not to conduct the 2021 unsheltered point in time count, we'll just need a motion to that regard.
This is Senia. I motion that we don't do a point in time count this year, knowing that we won't be dinged for not doing it this year.
And we'll just amend that it's an unsheltered point in time count, because we'll still do a sheltered point in time count.
Thank you.
Is there a second for that motion?
I second it.
Okay, is there any other further discussion on the motion?
And that was Judy seconding the motion, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other discussion on the motion, Rachel, do you want to do a roll call?
Yes. Okay, I have Roseanne Ibarra.
Abstain.
Okay. Lisa Judd.
We didn't hear you, Lisa.
Yes.
Jacqueline Williams.
Yes.
Susan Wynn, oh, she's not here. Grace Peeler.
Her audio's having difficulty connecting.
Oh, I see.
Libby, could you talk to us? Could you respond, please, Libby?
I'd say yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Paul Davis.
Yes.
Xenia Livia Chu.
Leva Cho.
Oh,
Yes.
Livia Cho. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Karen Lovato.
Yes.
Blythe Post.
Yes.
Judy Albert.
Yes.
Camille Schrader.
Yes.
Dan McIntyre.
Yes.
Noble Wadelick.
I don't see Noble on here anymore.
Oh, he's not here. Okay. All right. And Rachel no, she's not here. Sandra Stolpe.
Yes.
Sandra, okay. Okay, we have a total of 11 yeses, 1 abstaining.
Motion passed.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go to the next topic, which is the HAP ad hoc committee. We had originally established this committee to help Veronica develop the budget for the HAP and to work with the county on their portion. Since that's taken place, we've been handling these auxiliary funding sources through the strategic planning committee. So we no longer need the ad hoc committee, and we need a motion to disband the committee for administrative reasons.
I move to disband the HAP committee for administrative reasons.
I second.
Okay, is there any discussion on this? Basically, we're just doing the HAP work inside the strategic planning committee, so there's no need for the ad hoc. So with that, we need a roll call, Rachel?
Okay, Roseanne Ibarra,
Yes.
Lisa Judd,
Yes.
Jacqueline Williams.
Yes.
Let's see, we're going through Libby for Grace Peeler.
I'm sorry, I was not attending what you just said.
This is the vote to disband the 2020 HHAP committee. This would be for Grace's vote.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Paul Davis,
Yes.
Xenia.
Yes.
I don't want to botch your name again. Thank you. Karen Lovato,
Yes.
Blythe Post,
Yes.
Judy Albert,
Yes.
Camille Schrader,
Yes.
Dan McIntyre.
Yes.
Noble's not here. Okay. Sandra Stolpe.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes with 12 yes votes.
Thank you, Rachel. All right, we're going to go on to board protocols and governance. Veronica, I want to thank you for updating these standards. I read them, so that's actually, I think, the second time I've read them, but that's definitely some work to put into those. So I'll let you go over the few brief changes on this that we need to update.
Can I I'm sorry, can I just step in for a quick second?
Go ahead, Megan.
I unfortunately have to do this other Zoom call at 2:30 that I can't get out of. I don't think I can. And I need to talk about E2. So I'm going to step away, but then come back. But if I can't, Veronica, hopefully you can handle it.
You want to talk about E2 really quickly in 4 minutes, or do you want to step away?
Megan, is your 2:30 with me?
Yes.
That's okay. You can miss. I'll fill you in.
Okay, great. So never mind. I'll stay. Thanks, Darcy.
Okay.
All right. I'll be gone. See ya.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Darcy.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Veronica.
Okay, so regarding the emergency shelter written standards, this is, just to give you guys some context, as part of the responsibility of operating a COC, a continuum of care is required to have written standards about each project type that that they offer and will sponsor services through. So we currently have them for emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. We are currently have an RFP, request for funding proposal, open for emergency shelter services funded through ESGCV funds. During part of that process, we received a question about what the length of stay for a client is under the current legislation and COVID-19 and things like that. So I did some research And I found that under the Hearth Act, it does exactly what I said. It says that COCs need to have written standards, and that's pretty much all it says. There used to be more stringent requirements through California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. And there were more requirements in each of those NOFAs that often would restrict services to 6 months. What I found out through my research is in 2016, during my hiatus from COC work, the state, when they passed those revised legislation in 2016, removed any length of stay limitations on the emergency shelter program through them, and leaves it up to the COC to decide what length of stay is. I submitted this question directly to HUD. They have on their HUD Exchange website an Ask a Question feature, or AAQ. And I asked them about the length of stay. And they were very clear in that during COVID-19, communities, COCs, shelter service providers should not be exiting people from emergency housing simply because they've maxed out their time in that agency, because COVID-19 is so infectious and is such a serious issue. So having that understanding, I went to the written standards for the emergency shelter projects, and I removed or rewrote areas that spoke to limiting the length of stay for shelter project participants. So I'm just going to go through this and let you guys know what changes I actually did. Well, actually, I don't think it would be, unless somebody wants to, I can go through and explain each and every change, but it's mostly, it's taking out any length of stay requirements and then adding in an addendum that, let me see, it's the very last page, page 13 of this packet, or page 17 of the whole agenda packet, addendum regarding infectious disease mitigation. And so I added a little bit about the guidance that HUD has provided and things like that.
Is there any questions on this from anybody?
Okay, this is really a dense question. These standards were developed by the COC?
Yes. So
our local COC.
Yes. So in 2012, when HUD passed the Hearth Act, it required COCs to have emergency shelter written standards to apply for funding. So it wasn't in the COC program application, it was in the Emergency Solutions Grant first round in 2012. And we absolutely had to have written standards in our application to qualify. It fell to me in 2012, working for Ford Street Project, to find a sample document, and I, with that board's approval, revamped or just the Sonoma County written emergency shelter standards. So this originally came from the Sonoma County area, from their COC. I revised the document to reflect Mendocino County and some of our things, and this was 8 years ago, so I have no idea what other changes I made. But that's where it came from. And my understanding is this would really be well, they were approved in 2016. So they've been revamped. They were revamped then. But I don't know what revisions were made then. That's where it came from.
Okay. I thank you. I was just a little surprised in reading some of the rules.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, I'm not unhappy with the rules. I was just a little surprised.
Okay.
At reading some of the rules.
Judy, are you surprised because we're not sure that all of our shelters are following all of these rules in this way, or that they need to be amended?
I was surprised because it certainly is not like a very much of a housing first model.
No, this was originally created well before Housing First was an approach by the federal government.
So that, I guess my question is it still a passable document?
I don't know enough to be able to answer that question.
I think it comes down to the definition of housing first, Judy, which is still somewhat arbitrary. There's some things in the document that I was surprised that we had to do at the shelter level. And nothing says that. What brought on this revision, Veronica? Was this a requirement of the new ESG funding, or is this something?
I wanted to be able to allow our current shelter and future shelter providers to be able to serve their clients for more than 6 months. I didn't, because COVID-19 is so serious, we got to get rid of that. And that's why I brought this forward.
So nothing prevents us from coming back and making this more housing first friendly?
Absolutely not. I would highly encourage, this should be a living document that's always being revised as our practices and needs of our community evolve.
And is there some base standards from the HUD's perspective of what has to be in there?
Probably, but I don't know what they are. But I could do more research.
Right. I think the answer to that, Dan, in when we created it, we leveraged Sonoma County because we knew those had gone through, and they didn't really have a template or suggestions. It was kind of a blank sheet of paper. So if we need to modify this, we could. I think the thing that I was worried about was that it's that 6 months in a 12-month period. We've helped a lot of people in motels and all this stuff. You could literally have somebody move into a shelter and they'd only be able to stay with you 6 or 8 weeks or something. So, during the pandemic, I was excited to see we could get rid of that artificial barrier to serve people. And frankly, for some people, it never was a good barrier with or without a pandemic. So it'll be interesting to see where we go back after the pandemic. But, they establish it so we could say emergency shelter stay is this, transitional housing is no more than 2 years. I mean, there were those kind of guard bands that I think, given what we've gone through, it'll be interesting to see what the state says now or what HUD directs them to do.
So, I completely understand about extending the stay during the COVID, and I think that's an excellent idea. I do think that looking at this, because I just had this happen with a RFA we had submitted for our transitional housing funds, and in my narrative, it got kind of shot back because I needed to address the HUD Housing First standards more specifically in terms of how we were going to implement them. And this is definitely not a Housing First standard document.
No, it's not.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that.
And I really think that it would be the realm of the Shelter and Solutions Committee to update this document. So I'll reach out to Angelica about it.
Yeah, reach out to him and see if we can put it more in a housing first model, because this I mean, this is almost more restrictive than the home key documentation that's going to be
Right.
used most likely. So it definitely needs to be addressed, but I think, you know, for today, if we can address the time frame, and then we can definitely make sure that there's an item that's addressed in the next, you know, 3 to 4 months, to make it more applicable to housing first, because that model's not going anywhere. You know, for good or worse of that model, but
Does that mean then we can count on the pandemic going somewhere?
no, no, we can count that the pandemic's going to be around for a while. As much as I want it to disappear, trust me. Is there any other questions on this? Because there's no questions, I guess we'll need a motion to approve these with the change, the remove the length of stay on it.
Probably somebody that doesn't currently operate an emergency shelter.
I move we accept the updated emergency shelter program standards.
I second that.
Thank you, Blythe. And Jackie, is there any other discussion on this? Hearing no discussion, Rachel, could you have a roll call, please?
Okay. Roseanne Ibarra,
Yes.
Lisa Judd,
Yes.
Jacqueline Williams,
Yes.
Grace Peeler, looks like you're here now.
I am. I'm going to abstain though, because I wasn't fully part of the conversation.
Okay.
Sorry.
Paul Davis,
Yes.
Zinnia,
Yes.
Karen Lovato,
Yes.
Blythe Post,
Yes.
Judy Albert,
Yes.
Camille Schrader.
Veronica, don't I need to abstain because we run a shelter?
You don't have to abstain. I was just saying we
Okay,
probably shouldn't have a motion from a shelter provider.
I approve. Okay, I approve.
Got it. Dan McIntyre
Yes.
and Sandra Stolpe.
Yes.
Thank you. We have 11 yes votes and 1 abstaining. Motion passes.
Thank you.
So, okay, so I'm just asking this, I don't know, because I just suddenly realized. So it's really Hospitality House and RCS who get the ESG grants. So does this mean, I didn't actually read all the little things. Does it mean it changes after COVID?
No, it just changed.
It changes, and then we'll have to review it and change it back as a COC once we get towards the end of the COVID issue. So there's still that clear timeline, Judy, between emergency shelters and transitional housing and permanent housing, right? We don't want shelters to turn into a 2-year stay.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I mean, because right now we just moved it, but then if there's no longer a COVID, the emergency shelters might want to have put in there how long they're going to have people there.
Yeah, we'll have to move it back at some point.
Come in. I'm sorry, this is Senya. I'm gonna have to jump off the call.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
We'll probably have to go back, Judy, and put some kind of limit on it in the future.
Yeah,
right?
I would think. I mean, it's we don't get ESG funds, but I would think that those people receiving them would want to be able to say, okay, you've reached your limit.
Yeah, it's a good exit clause. I think we'll have to go back and address that at some point.
Okay.
Hey, Veronica, with everybody dropping off, do we still have a quorum?
We should.
I think we're
1,
close now.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We have 12.
Okay, we're
right?
good.
Yeah, we're good. As long as we have 10.
Okay, Megan, do you want to talk about the COC, the ESG monitoring cycle?
Sure. So this is page 18 in your packet, I think. Yeah, second to last page. There's a one-page overview of this proposal that we are seeking input from the board on today. One of the, actually several of, so I'm going to back up for a little bit in the big picture concept. Embedded within goals 1.2, 1.3, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 4.3 of the strategic plan is reference to monitoring programs for outcomes, being, good stewards from the COC level of the funds that we're spending, and a lot of reference around identifying programs that work well and supporting them and providing support to those programs that might need additional support. So Veronica and I were kind of trying to figure out how are we going to bring some structure to this in a way that would be not too burdensome, and also relieve what I've been struggling with is the challenge of having community partners themselves evaluate each other and evaluate other community programs here in Mendocino County. It's difficult. We're a small community. I'm not sure we're best equipped to evaluate each other's programs in a sense. So what this proposal is suggesting is that for any organization that receives more than $100,000 in funding allocated by the Continuum of Care, which right now is, as we all know, this fairly substantial amount of funding coming through HEAP, HAP, CASH, COC program funding, and now ESG CARES Act money. Those programs, those organizations would be automatically included in what I'm calling the COC's program monitoring cycle. And if your program is up for that year for a program monitoring, HHSA as the lead entity would work with you to identify a consultant and I'm calling a subject matter expert from outside of the community that can come in and help provide technical assistance to you, an evaluation of your program, review your existing relevant policies and procedures, and kind of develop an internal report to you on your program, and then also a public report that would come to the COC. So it's a way to monitor our programs in a way that's organized and focused and not taking on too much at once. The idea is that this consultant would be paid out of the administrative overhead of funding that would be kind of most relevant to that project. So if you're heavily funded by HEAP, we would try to use some of this HEAP money, although that might become too hard to do soon. If you're heavily funded by ESG, we would be able to use ESG funding to support that subject matter expert. And what we were proposing is that in 2021 would be the year of emergency shelters. 2022 would be the year for transitional housing and rapid rehousing programs. And 2023 would be for permanent supportive housing programs. And then we would start the cycle over again. So it's a way to kind of add, spread out the work for Veronica and I and bring some focus to each of the program types over an ongoing cycle of technical assistance and program monitoring. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions before we talk about it more.
One other thing that I just want to add before we go to questions is this would be a confidential process between us as the monitoring agency, the consultant, and then the program being evaluated. There would be a report out to this board about, summarizing what that conversation or what that evaluation looked like, but that process and things like that, that's going to stay confidential.
I think I want to add another piece that I'm hoping this process can help with is me being internal to Health and Human Services. I sometimes am worried that our community-based providers have a lot of different contracts from a lot of different places. And I'm not sure on the county level that we're all making sure that they all make sense. So I think the subject matter consultant can also help the county to make sure that the work that we're asking of our community-based providers is consistent with each other. We're not creating conflicting contracts within our own agency, which I know happens sometimes. So there's a value as well to the county in making sure we're being consistent and clear and supportive to the programs that we're providing contracts to. And this would have to be housing focused programs and housing focused contracts.
Thank you, Megan. Is there any questions for Megan?
Megan, if you're operating one of these programs, but it doesn't meet the threshold, there won't be an opportunity to have your program reviewed?
I picked $100,000 out of nowhere. We could either lower the threshold, or I was just trying to define who would be expected to contribute, to be part of it. But are you asking if somebody ended up with only $80,000 in funding total for that year, would they not be able to? I was trying to avoid having to do a program monitoring for an organization that might get like a $10,000 grant or something. But if they wanted to, I don't know. What does the board think?
I think that's
Well, I
a good
just see a
question.
lot of value in this. I see a lot of value in it, and we have a transitional housing program that's completely self-funded. But if I had the opportunity to see what somebody thought about it, I would jump on that. I'm just saying.
So we could do something where you're required if it's over this $100,000, but it's optional if it's less than that, something along those lines.
Yeah, maybe there could be a share of cost under the 100 grand, right? Because if you were over the 100 grand, there would be, there would probably enough administrative to cover the cost. But if you're below that, I mean, I'm with Paul, if we had transitional housing and we were under it, getting that third party set of eyes on it would either validate or help us improve whatever that program may be, right? Maybe there could be a share of cost after, if it's under a certain threshold, just from a fiscal standpoint.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I think I have this. I'm kind of my first reaction was that if it's under 100,000, this would be a small program, and I wouldn't want to charge you for it because it would be a small program. But maybe that's not really the case. I'm trying to figure out how to support the smaller programs if they wanted that review.
I'm not saying that way is a share of cost. I just think there's value, no matter the size of the program. But there is a fiscal side of the larger programs that can support that review, where those smaller programs, it may be a burden, but maybe if they're reviewing more programs, that cost wouldn't be as much across all those programs, right?
Right. And I'll be honest, I don't know how much this would cost. I didn't think it would be super expensive to have this level of program review. So, but I really don't know.
Could we have any projects that are listed on the COC's housing inventory count to be, they can opt in?
Oh, that's one way to do it. Right. You mean rather than have it be related to how much COC funding they receive?
Right. But I wouldn't require it for everyone on the HIC, because there are programs on the HIC that have nothing to do with the COC. We
and
just
may
get
not want us to program review.
And we're not responsible for that. But there are, I would think that if an agency is on the HIC that is not funded by the COC in any way, said, we want to do this, will you please help us with this? We shouldn't say no.
Right.
Judy?
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, when we get our program reviews, so I'm just trying to capture what this is, they really are oriented in a very friendly way, as more like, we want to see that you have what we require in place. Let's see your policies, your organization charts, let's say your job descriptions, all the things all laid out. And do you need help? And so then they'll write a review of, okay, you didn't check this one. They send you a list beforehand. You didn't check this. You didn't check that. We give you 3 months to offer a correction. But it's all in the idea of a helping hand.
Right.
There's a separate fiscal audit that happens. So, I mean, I'm hoping that's the way that this would be approached.
Absolutely.
That's my vision when I was talking to Megan kind of about this, and Megan came up with this plan, was that it's like a mini technical assistance program, right? It's from a helping hand to make everybody better and to learn as a group what works and what doesn't work, right?
Right.
And I'll be frank, I mean, I think it helps the COC politically as well. When the community says, well, how are you making sure you're spending your money well? Or how are, you're all just, I'm going to use language here that's a little harsh, but you just give money to each other. How do you even review each other? This can help say, we have a process where we have an outside expert from outside come and look at our programs and give that feedback. So I think it provides some political cover as well, and a response to the community who's asking us, how are we making sure that we're running quality programs?
Yep.
But I agree, Judy, it's very much, and that's why I think Veronica referenced that it would be a confidential process. There would be a public report to the board, because I think that's important. But the details of like, you know what, you could have done this better, and like, okay, this is how I'm going to do it, doesn't need to be a whole public unveiling, but
Right.
more of a thing you work out together with that organization.
Jackie?
Yeah, I 2 quick points. I think of this like Judy did describe, in that it's kind of free consulting.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, just as we went through today in the emergency shelter stuff, HUD redefines things, the state redefines things, the regs get reinterpreted. When we work and find people that can come and do this for us, it's almost like that consulting where when you say, this is how we're doing it, do you know of a better way? These are often the people that know a better way. And so I do think it's in the spirit of that. Also, some of the feedback that I've received from the community, you can't believe how many people believe that as soon as we resolve homelessness, all our business go away. So, there's just this real negative perception, and I don't believe it's widespread, but it's very vocal. And so being able to say, these are taxpayer dollars, and we had to qualify for them, and we had to demonstrate what we do, and then we had a third-party person come in and evaluate it. I think it puts us in a much more comfortable position, because they do make the comment, well, you give money to each other, you evaluate each other, you're biased, the wrong people are on the committee or whatever. So I just think it just brings us up to I guess be better able to handle the scrutiny that may come our way.
Thank you, Jackie. Camille?
Yes, I completely, absolutely, wholeheartedly agree. I mean, at least for RCS, who is supposed to be the holder of the project with our community partners, it's been going for a year. I would love nothing better than to have some experts who, have done this work and understand what it is to come and say, so this works really well and this doesn't work so well. And you can have open, you can have closed. Here's the unintended consequences of both. It would be extremely valuable because if we're not do no harm, right? If we're not helping, then let's not do it. So it would be really, really helpful to have the experts and the people who've done this work in a variety of different models come and say, this is what seems like could work, and learn from the experts. So I thank you for thinking about it, and I think it would be invaluable.
Thank you, Camille. Karen?
Do we have knowledge of consultants that do this type of work that we'll be pulling from? I'm seeing not, so I'm just going to end there. That was my thought.
We're working on that, Karen.
And Karen, if you have any ideas, share them with us as well.
I don't. My experience with consultants as a broad category is depending on the level of experience that they have in what you're asking for, and your specificity in what you're asking for can make the difference between a really expensive contract and a more focused and useful contract. So that was sort of my thought, is making sure that we're working with someone who knows what they're doing, and we know what we're asking them to do.
Yeah.
So a quick add to that, Karen, is the state didn't want to implement some of the homelessness programs. So this was different than behavioral health issues. And they literally worked with local consultants or agencies. And so I almost feel like the brain trust for the work we do in providing homeless services really rests in some of these other agencies that have always been kind of the boots on the ground and that we might be able to contract with. I feel like they're more knowledgeable than even the state. So it really was, it came about unintended way, but I think it's going to help us as we move forward.
And our HUD TA provider, Chris Pitcher, he's been in this business for probably going on 20 years. And so he really knows Region 9 very, very well. And that includes California, Arizona, Nevada, places like that. And so he's got his finger on the pulse of this industry, and can really, when we put our idea is to put an RFQ out and then to make sure that we get to send out to all of those people that he's recommending to us, so that we get it, that kind of exposure and make sure that those people know about it.
I just one caveat on that, Veronica, that would be the ideal method to do an RFQ. If it turns out that that's going to be too long or complicated, we may pivot, but that's
okay.
That's
our envision. That's what we have envisioned.
No, I know. I think that what I struggle with, one of the major many limitations of working in government is I've tried to do like an informal RFP. Let me just ask around, and then that gets all complicated too. So we have to use careful language about what we do if it's an official RFQ or something different. So Veronica and I will spend some time on that, but my vision too was that the consultant that was selected would be in partnership with the programs being evaluated. So we would all be like, yes, this sounds like a good fit. We're all on the same page about what this person can provide and what we're looking for there.
Megan, do you think we would come to the board with to get their stamp of approval on the person we pick? Would the board like that? Is that necessary? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. What does the board think? I'm not sure. I don't know. I hadn't thought of that.
I think we're still early in the process of this. It's more of a conceptual, and we're gonna have to try it a couple times.
I think the other thing is I've learned that we may find the one we think would work. I think we want to know of the last 2 or 3 counties or agencies that they supported, so we can make some calls, and then we'll know if we're confident or not. Judy, you and Libby are probably the only people on the call that will remember this, but we had consultants when we started this, and they came in and they were telling us what to do and how we had to do it. And their example was Atlanta, Georgia. So, I mean, I just wanted to shoot them after we spent 2 days with them, because we wasted all that time. I mean, there are a lot of things that we have in common, but probably not a lot with Atlanta, Georgia, where they had enormous housing programs that were well established. And I mean, it was sad. So, I think Veronica's point about somebody that really understands rural, our region is
right. And I think to that end, Jackie, I was drawn towards California specific as well. I don't know if that's a mistake or not, but I was thinking, not Mendocino County, obviously, but something outside of Mendocino County, but still specific to California, because we do seem to have maybe some more specific rules than other states. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think we do.
I think that would be a good idea to kind of look around and see where those consultants are that are, familiar with our demographics, with our rural struggles, with our resources, etc., and then maybe present to the board a couple of the consultants and get feedback on which ones we may want to go with.
Okay. We can do it that way.
Megan, I know Sage Wolf has a few names from the homeless conferences that have occurred that are actual providers or people that had run a variety of different models too. And I think she's going to get that list to you, right?
She did mention that. So that would be great. Okay. So then maybe we'll bring the consultant ideas back to the board for approval, and just so that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, we're trying to just float the concept out there, and we're going to have to develop this as it goes through, and each program may be a little bit different.
Right. And I think I want to think a little bit more about welcoming in those programs that don't meet that $100,000 threshold without us paying too much for it. So if you don't mind, Dan and Jackie, I'll think a little bit more about how we could structure.
Yeah, that's fine. I just want to think we just need to be conscious of the administrative burden and the cost from the county's perspective, right? And balance that with the benefit.
I do see a sense of responsibility for our HHSA as the lead entity for the whole system, and the COC for the whole system, regardless of whether they had money or not. But I just didn't want to force program monitoring on somebody who could say, I don't want you to monitor me.
Well, I think that there's benefit to the presentation, right? And I think, I'm always open to outside consultants' opinions on how things work, and that doesn't necessarily mean it works that way.
Right.
But there's been a lot of times that, once they step in, they see something that's sitting right in front of me that I've missed for months.
Right.
And that could be no different than Jackie and I have a conversation, and Jackie asked me a question, or Lisa, and something I've missed, or something that's been right in front of my face, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. So,
and I'm hoping to build in an element of maybe I'm putting too much on this fictional person that I don't know who they are yet, but helping the community understand what's a realistic expectation of a provider and what's not. And I do feel like sometimes all of our programs, the community thinks you're supposed to, control a homeless person's behavior that may be 5 blocks away from your facility. And so if there's some way to also show like this is what a well-run shelter looks like, and you will still have these problems, that kind of perspective from an outside agency, I think would be very helpful to our community.
I think that's a consistent battle we're going to have. I battle that in every single county I work in.
Okay, so do we need a motion on this, Veronica, or do we just carry on?
No, just keep working on it.
Okay.
We're going to go down to funding if there's nothing else on this, because we're at 3:02 and we still have some funding updates from staff. There's no further update, Veronica, on cash, I see.
No.
Okay.
Going strong.
Do you want to give an update on ESG from the last meeting? I know we talked about it a little bit in the strategic planning, but either Veronica or Megan.
I'll go ahead and take this one. Megan can do heap. So nothing under the balance of state regular one. We haven't heard back from the 2020 awards yet, so we're still waiting for that. For the ESGCV funds, round 2 application has been submitted. And I was able to run the budget by the strategic planning committee. I've included that budget with your packet. It's the last page. And so you can see how we broke it up. One thing to note is homeless prevention was not an allowable activity for round 2 unless we could demonstrate that we had enough shelter beds for 100% of our unhoused population in our 2019 point in time count. So unless we were able to demonstrate we had over 750 housing beds specifically for people who are homelessness, that's what we had to do in order to get homeless prevention. So since we haven't met that yet, we weren't able to get homeless prevention funds from round 2. The strategic planning committee doesn't see this as a concern because there are so many other funding sources out there, primarily through NCO, to help folks who are in need of eviction prevention services because of COVID-19. So, and we also have the HEAP funds and able to come with that. So they weren't too concerned about that one. We were able to make up the difference between what was, so in the first round, I submitted my initial budget, and then the strategic planning committee met and proposed a revised budget. When I submitted that revised budget, it didn't get into the contract. So we made round 2 make up the difference. So what the COC wanted to see funded is included in this 100%.
And as another add-on to this is a recommendation to the county. It does not mean that the COCS.
Oh, you're breaking up.
We can continue to advocate with county staff to see that the money is not used for other things than what we see as a priority need.
Right. One piece that the strategic planning committee spoke about that maybe Dan or Megan can speak to better is regarding HHSA's use of the ESGCV funds, in that there are a lot of internal projects that we operate here that like our street outreach pilot project that could really use some expansion. So it felt really weird, HHSA responding to its own RFP. So the strategic planning committee gave HHSA permission to use its discretion in funding those types of internal projects, as long as we keep the strategic planning committee aware of what our spending is. So, regularly, updates on what we're spending.
Is there any questions, Veronica, or anything you want to add, Megan?
No, I did want to, I appreciated that reminder from Veronica that this ESG money is in a kind of funny place in that it's being handled by the county, and it's not really required to have COC make all the decisions, but more collaborate with the COC. And we're choosing to have it go through a pretty heavy COC process. But in doing that, I really did want to make sure that we were able to fund existing projects that fit within these guidelines here in the county. I don't expect these to be big expenditures, but I appreciate the ability to do that without kind of a struggle.
I think what everybody's got to realize is there's a ton of money that's come out in the second round with a very, very strict deadline. Yes. Jackie and I met with Assemblyman Wood week before last, I think, and we kind of spoke to the quick timelines on home key and this, and you know, we're very candid about sometimes the difficulties those tight deadlines bring on fiscal responsibility and funding a program in an efficient and effective manner. And, you know, I think that he understood our point that, you know, while we appreciate the money, we're not turning it down, and we're going to do our best to focus the funding. We just need to make sure we can spend the funding, because if we don't, it goes back, then that just looks really negative on the county, and the county should be really proud about getting a large allocation. You know, well, proud, it probably isn't the word to say, but we got it proportionate to our homeless need. Because there are other counties that we work with at RCHDC that didn't get as large of ESG money allocation. So, you know, yet have proportionally the same amount of need. So
it is. I agree that it's difficult to have a large amount of money in such a short period of time. It doesn't really lend itself to good planning or program. I mean, it's not helpful. I mean, I really wish that even another year, two would be awesome, but that's not what we're faced with.
Our HUD-TA provider said that we should not be concerned about overspending, because there's going to be a lot of COCs that aren't able to meet those spending thresholds, and that's funding that's going to be able to be reallocated. So if we feel like, or if we see a way to spend more than $5 million, we should do it.
Any other questions on this topic? No, thank you, Veronica, for the update. We'll move on to HEAP. Megan, if you want to add more to, we kind of talked about this previously.
Sorry, yeah, I feel like we covered this earlier, so I don't have anything more to add here.
Okay. There's no FUP update or HAP. We'll go down to the grant cycle. Veronica, you want to give us an update on that?
Yes. So HUD is still debating on how it's, okay, no, wait, I had to orient myself. So the 2020-2021 grant cycle for the COC program, the HUD staff is trying to get it to where we can just renew our 2019-2020 grant applications and contracts, so that we would not have to do another NOFA this cycle. So I'm just going to read exactly what our HUD-TA provider put that's in your agenda. HUD anticipates that a congressional bill will be passed in December that will allow HUD to follow a minimal COC application process. If Congress acts, HUD would publish a list of grants. COCs would confirm the list of grants and or notify HUD of any issues or changes. A few weeks later, grants would be funded. Planning and UFA, we don't have any UFA, Unified Funding Agency grants, would stay static, and there would be minimal reallocation opportunities. COC will need to reach out to field office and or SNAPs if they want to reallocate funding. So basically, we would just keep everything the way it was last year, unless this COC wants to see changes. Our HUD-TA provider said that it would be easiest for us to move forward to renew the projects. And then if we had any changes or reallocations we wanted to do that after the grant agreements have come out and the standard agreements have been put in place. It's easier to amend something than to revise it and resubmit it in the beginning because of everything that's going on. This is 100% contingent on Congress. Congress has to include this in their bill. So I don't know what their next CARES Act is going to look like. I haven't been able to follow all of that political stuff, but included in that package is this to allow HUD to renew those contracts. It's a congressional schedule. It's congressionally required that they have to do this NOFA this year. So if Congress doesn't act and doesn't pass anything in December, we're going to have to scramble, and we don't know what that's going to look like yet.
Thank
I
you.
hope we
Veronica.
don't even have to think about it. You're welcome.
Is there any questions on this? Okay, not seeing any questions. Veronica, number 7.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't put my name next to it. I wanted to let everybody know a objective of the HMIS capacity building grant is to hire an additional HMIS administrator. And I am very pleased to announce that we have hired someone. Kirsty Bates starts today. She's currently doing her new employee orientation. And as soon as we're done here, I'm going to go introduce myself.
Thank you, Veronica. Is there any other funding updates, Megan or Veronica? No? Okay. We're going to move on to projects. Anybody have anything under projects? There's nothing listed on here.
I just would like to let everyone know that I'm applying for my McKinney-Vento grant right now. It's due in February, and previously we've asked for a letter of support from the COC that I'm an active participant, and that helps with my grant funding. So I'll want to bring that maybe to the board for our next regular meeting.
Okay. And Blythe, just a question, it's not really on projects. Are you guys doing the warm coat drive again this year?
Yes, we are. We got some of the community foundation funding for $10,000. And so we are utilizing some of that right now. We had 118 kids on our clothing or our jacket list so far. So we got most of them covered under that grant. But I will let you know if we come up with any more kiddos. It's starting to get cold.
Yes, it is.
We also will probably be teaming up with the Christmas drive folks this year. We usually do our own Christmas drive, but they're having a really hard time locating families since kids are moving around a lot, not on the campus. So I think the Christmas drive is really aiming to try and help target families. So they may operate some of their stuff that they get to come through our program to serve our kids as well this year. So.
Okay. Thank you, Blythe.
Yeah.
Is there any other announcements? Rosanna?
Hi, everyone. So I just wanted to share out some information from Adventist Health. So I'm the Director of Community Wellbeing for all 3 of our hospitals here in Mendocino County. And for those that have not been informed yet, our president of the hospital, Jason Wells, is transitioning into a new role. He'll be moving to our corporate office in Roseville as the new Chief Consumer and Innovation Officer. So he'll be overseeing consumer services, marketing and branding, public affairs, and strategy activation. So he will, however, continue to be connected here in the community. He'll be chairing our community boards for the hospitals starting in January. And so interviews were conducted. No official announcement has been made yet to announcing the position has been filled, but that is in process. The other update I have is that in March of this year, Adventist Health acquired Blue Zones. And Blue Zones are regions throughout the world where people live longer and have a higher rate of well-being. And there's a whole policy framework and strategy regarding lifestyle habits that's associated with it. And Adventist Health will be rolling out blue zones across its 23 hospitals. So that's in California, Oregon, Washington, and Hawaii. And here in Mendocino County, we are designated as one of the first in the first wave of the rollout. So that'll be starting in the new year. So I'm in process right now for doing the behind the scenes planning and what that will look like. So conversations will be initiated here shortly in our community. So I'll be reaching out to you. The other update I wanted to share is that I'm working with colleagues internally within our local system here to better understand the substance use and opioid use treatment system of care in our county, and also mapping out how behavioral health, mental health, and housing intersect with that. So I just want to put a pin in that for everyone, that I'll be collecting and gathering that information, and I'm more than happy to share it out on what the findings are. But the information is going to be used for how to approach when we're thinking about program development and design to understand what is the current ecosystem and what services are needed. The last update I have is regarding adverse childhood experiences. So there was a internal team launched last week for us at Adventist Health to design a plan on how to do screenings within our clinics and then to become trauma informed. So I foresee that this is going to dramatically shift how we interface with our patients. And I also want to share with the group that I really see this as something that's going to further the work that our child advocates have been doing in our community, and particularly you all that are our service providers in the community that are supporting individuals that have experienced trauma. So those are the updates I share with the group.
Thank you, Roseanne.
Welcome.
So just a couple things from RCHDC's perspective that really are just general announcements, but it really affects everybody at the table because we are going to start leasing up the first phase of Ore Creek on sometime in the early spring of next year. And for everybody that went through the leasing process for Willow Terrace, it's going to be similar in that fate. You know, we find that we take 3 applicants to find 1 resident, sometimes more. We went through about 120 applicants for Willow Terrace. So that information is going to be coming out through CDC and through RCHDC. And then I know I've told some of you this, but I didn't address it in the last COC meeting, is that we were awarded tax credits for the second phase of Ore Creek, which we will be building another complex right next door to that one that's under construction now. That will be leasing up in 2022. There's additional developments in the works for Mendocino County, but just kind of an update that the housing is really moving forward for us and for other tax credit partners in the county. So,
Ken, can you remind us how many units are in that first phase?
There's 40 units in the first phase, and there'll be 40 units in the second phase.
And they were some permanent supportive, some studios, some family. I can't.
Out of all, so the first phase is a little bit more straightforward than the second phase. The first phase is 49% that have to meet a homeless requirement or a risk of homelessness, similar to what the Home Key Project has, similar to what Willow Terrace has. The other remaining portion is general affordable.
Okay.
The second phase has I believe 9 units, and I don't quote me on this, but I believe 9 units that are set aside for general affordable. There is some set aside in the second phase for the regional centers clients, some for transitional age youth, and then the 49% that's special needs. The 45% special needs has to do with the Article 34 elections that basically no county in the state of California has held. I mean, Mendocino County's last election was in 1989 or 1990, something like that. So that's something as a county we're probably going to address. But working with Lisa, there's really no clear path on how to address an Article 34 election. So it's something we're going to have to figure out, which would better help us target housing in a lower income bracket. And that really restricts the lowest of income housing. unless we find a special niche as happened with Willow Terrace or some of the other ones. So it's really about increasing the housing stock, right, to release the burden on other housing stock that may not have those requirements. So while we may not target a particular population that might need housing, we could possibly house those that are underhoused, or maybe in other housing that might be a little bit too much for them, that opens it up for workforce or other redevelopment. So as all these are being added, and the Danco project in the coast is being added, and then there's additional housing here in the city of Ukiah that's being added, it just overall the housing stock's increasing. And it's, it will take time to filter the stuff out, but I think in the long run, there's going to be, more adequate housing coming. We've been working on, it takes 2 to 3 years to do a housing project. So we started on the second phase of Ore Creek in 2017, and we started on the first phase in 2016. So it's something we have to plan ahead for and kind of chase the funding. Outside of this county, we got awarded 2 other tax credit deals, one in Corning and one in Eureka, that are all 3 of them are closing at the same time, which will be around March of next year. We have an additional 7 projects in the pipeline in other counties, from Calaveras clear to Butte to Del Norte and Trinity. So there's a lot of funding coming down for housing. It's just a very slow process to complete it.
Well, congratulations, Dan. It's sorely needed.
Yeah, it is sorely needed, and we're trying to work on, we have a real passion here for trying to find some kind of workforce family housing up to the 80% AMI level. It's just trying to find the seed money for that is highly complicated. And that's what really drives these. So hopefully, working with Senator McGuire and Assemblyman Wood, we can find some programs that can fund that type of housing, that really put that market in that, is needed around the county, because the niche markets eventually are going to fill up with farmhousers, seniors and stuff. There's going to become a saturation on that side. And we really need to get that workforce housing for the hospital and for, the schools, and that's affordable, because that's really critical to stabilizing the housing issues we have. And is there any other announcements, since I've talked forever? Okay, if not, I see on here that we want to talk about rescheduling or canceling the next meeting, which is December 21st. Veronica, what's your recommendation? Move it into January, or?
That's what I was thinking. Just cancel and we'll meet again in January. I mean, I guess we could make it earlier in December. I'm just thinking that week is going to be really hard for people.
So December is going to be really hard for me, period.
Yep.
Yes, let's cancel.
Unless I hear any verbal objections, where our next meeting will be in January.
So I'm okay with that. My only recommendation is, then would I be able to send like a draft letter of what the COC wrote for my grant last year, so it doesn't hold me up?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll approve it at the January meeting, Blake.
Okay.
So December is scheduled to be a full membership meeting. So we'll move the full membership meeting to January, but there's nothing that prevents us from doing board work as well at the same meeting. So we can do that, Blythe, no problem.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Veronica has been super overloaded, so this gives us a little breathing room, and I thank you.
Well, we're going to need all the breathing room we can take with Home Key.
Yes, I know.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Okay, if there's nothing else.
Our next meeting will be on January 18th, 2021 at 1:30 p.m.
So we can type Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas.
Yes. Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. See you next year.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Everybody later.